without further ado, John actually, funnily enough, in his citation earlier, mentioned Kenneth Frampton's, one of Kenneth Frampton's best known works of architecture. It was what reminds us that Kenneth Frampton has always been, I think, first and foremost, an architect, a writer about architecture, but an architect in the fullest sense, and one who practiced. And I was remembering actually soon after I graduated, I moved to London. I was practicing in London. At that time, there were two architecture bookshops off Kensington Church Street, near Kensington High Street, second-hand architecture bookshops, which are the only kind of architecture books you can afford. And on the road from Notting Hill Gate to Kensington High Street, one used to pass a very distinguished-looking 8-storey block of apartments, very particular window pattern, very particular section. And I remember thinking, that's an interesting building. And only subsequently, of course, discovering that this was a building that Kenneth Frampton had made during his time with Douglas Stevens. And I take that as a reminder that his heart, I think, is always in architecture as it is practiced. And also as a reminder of we all start somewhere. We all can make significant work right from the outset of our careers. And so I'm really delighted to now ask Kenneth Frampton to address the graduating classes of 2012 at Centenary Year.
Well, I have a piece of paper because John said you just have to say a few words, and then I realized I had to think about what I was going to say, and therefore I have this piece of paper, because otherwise I would get lost, and I probably would get lost anyway. But I want to thank, of course, UCD and John and Hugh in particular, and all the other supportive colleagues and friends that are in this room and also probably not in this room, that have always welcomed me to Ireland and with whom I have a very strong affinity. And I feel it's a privilege and an honor, and of course doubled by being awarded this doctorate. I mean, it's a little overwhelming, and John's remarks were quite overwhelming, and well, much appreciated. So I don't know I can live up to that, but I will try. And I was thinking, looking at the scrap of paper before I started, that I believe it was an ambition of Walter Benjamin's to actually write a text which would consist of nothing but quotation. And I can't possibly even aspire to that, but there will be a few quotations. I thought I would begin by actually explaining the piece of paper, because I told John coming here that a colleague of mine whose name is Emilio Ambas, who probably is not entirely unfamiliar to some of you, many, many years ago came up with this criticism that spontaneity has to be rehearsed, and this is kind of rehearsed spontaneity. And as it so happens, an Argentine living in Bologna, but passing through New York at a certain crucial stage in my life. In fact, when I first set foot, or rather arrived from aircraft and helicopter to the Newark airport, I was met by, the first person I met in the States was Emilio Ambas. So he has left an indelible impression upon me for many different reasons. So I want to congratulate you, begin by once again congratulating all of you on coming through, of course, with this degree after so much hard work and so on. And to welcome you to what I think is still in some ways a mysterious profession. I like the fact that I believe in Italian the term for craftsmanship is mistieri, and I think that architecture ultimately is a craft in this techno-scientific age that we are dominated, I think, totally by techno-science. Now this strange métier is ultimately a craft. I remember when I was, of course, a very long time ago, in the 50s, there were still these belabored discussions about whether architecture was a business, or whether it was a science, or whether it was an art. and of course that in a sense has its kind of rather ridiculous argument, has a way of perpetuating itself whenever people maybe at a sort of everyday level more than inside the profession. But I feel it is very much a craft in a way, and is related to craft. And the other thing I wanted to say about the practice of architecture is that despite much vaunted age of spectacle, replete with its star architects, which can of course be fused together to make star architects, you know. Architecture, I think, remains an exceptionally collective endeavor, and much in the same way as I think the cinema, film, is very much a collective endeavor. So that despite the fact that one has to have creative leadership, etc., to make a work, to make a film, to make a building, nonetheless, when you if you're honest about it, the number of people that contribute to the making of this building at so many different levels makes it into a collective work which distinguishes it, I think, very strongly from the other arts, you know, all the other arts, and makes it also very difficult art, if it is an art, as opposed to a craft. Makes it, in any case, a very difficult craft, in that it is very, you know, linked to material culture, that it is inextricably mixed up with the life world, which is not true of music, or even not true, I think, obviously not of cinema. And in that sense, it makes it a very demanding game, I think. And I think when you think of certain very distinguished, successful architects, you sometimes think, how can that figure combine so many different capacities in the one person in a way, which is perhaps slightly contradicts what I was saying about collective. But I mean, this combination of political awareness, a sense of politics in a smaller sense, when to push and when not to push, when to yield. I mean, all those kinds of things which cannot, of course, be learned in school and can only be acquired through experience and maybe also instinct, you know. And the fourth thing I wanted to say, these things are sort of numbered, but you never know because I haven't mentioned the first three in any case. But the other factor to be borne in mind, I think, that, you know, that, and I tell students this, although, I mean, it's like falls on deaf ears, I suppose. Maybe I don't tell it often enough, but I mean, it's obviously the case that there are many different ways of being an architect, of practicing architecture, and one can't, and one, you know, just one has to find one's own way, basically. And there isn't, you know, one way of doing this, of fulfilling one's destiny, if you like, as an architect, you know. Actually, it reminds me of this, talking of quotations, this beautiful aphorism. Well, I think it's a kind of aphorism. It's Alvaro Ziza, who is always good for some pithy, memorable remark. I remember at some kind of seminar he said, I tell them, the university authorities, that an architect is a specialist in non-specialization, but they can't take that not even as a joke. And I think it does say something about this mysterious craft profession, you know. But I wrote down here, disconnected, totally disconnected, another aphoristic remark, which is actually from Le Corbusier in the 1930s to AS students. You know, I like this somehow, it's very kind of primitive. I think he said, you can check it out in the magazine Focus, you're a drawing board organizer, not a stylist. You know? And that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that style is not an issue, but I like the kind of rhetoric. You're a drawing board organizer, not a stylist. Of course, it suits a particular moment in history. I think another, you know, apposite reminder for a rising generation of architects, which you are, you know, is this question of material culture and the fact that architects have to confront, I think, maybe more, I really think, more than any other profession, have a kind of civic, everyday sense. They have reality put in their faces, so to speak. They have to confront reality, you know. And it's easier, I think, for, you know, given the division of labor, for certain professions to escape into the containment of the profession, you know, whether it's law or it's business or it's different arcane branches of science and so on. This reminds me of the famous Tom Lehrer line about Donald John Brown. You know, there's this beautiful line where he says, the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? It's not my department, said Donald John Brown. This is something that really generally is not given to an architect, I think, this kind of game of hiding behind specialization. It goes along with, of course, the Ziza remark about being specialist in non-specialization. And in this business of confronting the real, there is all sorts of different kinds of levels of recalcitrance. You know, there's a recalcitrant I suppose, but first and foremost, one should say the recalcitrant of clients, but of course, but also needs, of course, clients that, besides their recalcitrant, really want something, you know, that have a desire. And there is the ever-expanding recalcitrance of bureaucracy. And there is then the recalcitrance of the material itself, how to transform material, what material one can use, knowing how, you know, of course, all that business of how these materials perform and what chances there is of durability, this question of durability, which brings me to this other aspect, I think, which architects are kind of perennially confronted with, which is the question of time. You know, reality and time, I think. The question of durability comes up with time, but also, you know, somehow or other, this profession is very aware. I mean, what does history of physics mean to a physics graduate? You know, what does, you know, you could go on like that through many subsets, you know, but in architecture, I think history means something, I still think, to keep my job, but I think in any case, at a deeper level, you know, time is present, you know, this question of the durability of the building. Actually, there's a very beautiful thing I think by Raphael Moneo called Solitude of Buildings, where he says, you know, this very beautiful thing about an architect finally having to release the building to survive on its own in society. You know. You can no longer protect it anymore, it has to survive on its own. I think that's also a recognition of time, you know. So I think reality, time, topography, climate, these are the existential conditions that architects are always constantly reminded of, you know. Which brings me back to Ziza. I don't know why here in this particular, I've come to the end of point 5, who would know? But anyway, at the end, I wrote down Ziza, and to remind myself of this unbelievable aphorism of his. Architects don't invent anything, they transform reality. You know, I just think it's such a profound, ironic statement, and it leads me to 6th point, this question of irony. I mean, I think an architect, you know, yes, it's a prerequisite, I think, for being an architect to have a kind of strong sense of irony, as opposed to cynicism. Irony, you know, and I think irony contributes to the intelligence and skill of an architect, you know. The ironic aphorisms, such as ones I've used already, which to guide and sustain one's critically creative potential, you know, throughout one's life and also throughout a job. This, in my view, is what one should look for. You know. Where am I now? Lost my place. Yes, irony, imagination, intelligence, along with strong sensitivity for place and identity, and an awareness that architecture implicitly and concretely is always about value, about embodied value. In my 7th point, I'm coming here, and last, but rather long-winded, is I wanted to express on this occasion my very strong, once again, my strong feelings about Ireland and about Irish architecture, and about UCD in particular, about this school of architecture, of course, about, maybe I first came here to a review 15 years ago or something with Eric Parry and Karen and when John Toomey and Shelley McMurrough were still teaching here. And I remember being so impressed by the drawings, by the beautiful drawings on the walls, that sort of these mysterious renderings in light blue, grey, charcoal black hues of some relatively remote landscape site. I don't quite remember where, I thought that, coming from New York and coming from, it was like, it was unreal, this feeling for the place. I mean, generically, but also for light and for materials and so on. And it prompts me, as John mentioned, to talk about architecture as a kind of resistant collective, potentially resistant collective cultural discourse involving the society, standing against the present tendency of the late modern globalized world, that would, if it can possibly do it, will try to commodify everything and everybody, sweep it into the maelstrom of the market. And resistance, I think, takes many forms. I know it. In one form it is taken in Ireland of recent date is to create a culture of food, which is in itself resistant, I think. And architecture, I think, also in Ireland is resistant. And the need to look after food and to look after water and those kinds of things which will become more and more urgent, I would say. It's this point at which ethics and aesthetics, I think, sort of come together in a sense in this strange, mysterious craft. This question of value, pulls ethics and aesthetics together. I mean, I don't have any respect for spectacular architects who use steel like it's just nothing. Just we can sort of do what the hell we like with it. We can do very irrational structures with it, and I don't want to mention any particular names, but you can see it. It's so obvious, and I think it's unethical. It's culturally barbaric, I think, is the word, although it's celebrated, spectacle again. And it brings me back to the end of this question of culture as embodied value, and maybe in the end the unavoidable political dimensions of architecture. And with this, maybe one final ironic aphorism with which to extend my good wishes for your future. Actually, it strikes me as very odd that I began this piece with a quotation from an Argentine, and I'm going to end it with a quotation of an Argentine. And it's actually, I met both of these Argentines in Princeton. It has nothing, I would like to pretend it has nothing to do with the fact that my wife was born in Argentina. And but anyway, this is Thomas Maldonado, which I first heard him say this in Princeton in the mid-60s. And I think, of course, it applies to architecture, but it applies, to the world that's unfolding around us. It's a beautiful, laconic aphorism. While one cannot make anything without waste, this is distinguishable from the ideology of waste. And with that, I'll shut up. Thanks.